Hi, I'm Roberta, and today I'm recording a conversation with someone that I find really fascinating. And I thought that maybe he might be able to provide some information that you might find really interesting and valuable as well. So today I am talking with James Williamson, and James is currently the Director of Information Systems and Technology for a national nonprofit organization, one that I'm vaguely familiar with as well. Full disclosure, James and I are actually colleagues, and he has a very extensive resume and history with information systems that goes more than 25 years with the public sector, the private sector. He's a very smart cookie, no question about that. But of course, I am not here to talk to James about information technology. Through our conversations, I discovered that James is actually a long-time Buddhist and has had a very interesting life and some really interesting experiences as he follows this path to enlightenment. And I thought it might be really interesting to have this chat with him and hopefully bring some enlightenment to anyone who's watching. So James, thank you so much for agreeing to do this with me.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me, Roberta.
Thanks. So let's start at the very beginning, okay? Why don't you talk a little bit about what Buddhism is and what it means to you?
Buddhism to me, briefly, I got into it through, I decided to become atheist when I was 12. And when I discovered Buddhism, it was really for me kind of like an atheism plus, that there was no God, no son of a God, no inspiration by a God. Everything was achieved through human effort. And in many ways, I know a lot of people consider it more of a philosophy than a religion, due to the fact that that there is no theistic portion to Buddhism. And that's what attracted me, in terms of me being more of a rational thinker. Buddhism came, Buddhism started in the East, and in many ways, I guess people would compare Buddhism in the East to the way Christianity is in the West, that a lot of people are born into it and they treat it more like the way people treat Western religions today. There hasn't been a deep choice or thought to go into that religion. They're basically indoctrinated by birth. And where there's been a big trend of Western people who are not born into Buddhism choosing through their own readings and their own spiritual journeys to go into Buddhism. And in some ways they feel that they're more truer representation, because like any religion over time has evolved a whole bunch of infrastructure and constructs around it that are not necessarily true to the original teachings. And similar, people would say a lot of Easterners that have chosen to go into Christianity are maybe pure Christians because they really have read everything in detail from the beginning to the end through a desire, not through parental indoctrination. And so there are Buddhist temples in the West, of course. Some are just Eastern temples moved into the West. Others are new temples that have started. They still carry some of the constructs from the East. Some of them, some people, I consider myself more, I call a non-practicing Buddhist, that I don't go to temple. I don't find the constructs of temple serve me. I don't have anything against it. It just doesn't serve my structure of how I think and believe. But for me, Buddhism is really more an understanding of human nature, understanding the construct of human nature, that everything, we start through ignorance, and ignorance leads to suffering, which leads to bad thoughts, bad decisions, bad actions, and which then in turn causes more suffering. And we're on this sort of vicious cycle through our own ignorance of causing pain to ourselves and to others. And the way to stop that is to enlighten yourself, to stop that pain, stop those wrong thoughts and wrong words and wrong deeds. And that's usually achieved through meditation. And meditation for me is really, there are a couple of methodologies: counting your breaths, being hyper aware of your surroundings. But fundamentally, Buddhism is about quieting your mind And one analogy that I really like in Buddhism is if you consider your mind is like the ocean, and the moon is the truth, and your thoughts are the wind, and the wind causes waves on the ocean, on your mind. And so you can't see the reflection of the moon. You cannot see the truth that is the moon. And that's just your turbulent mind of living day-to-day life and activity. And as you meditate and you calm your thoughts down, that the wind dies down, and then the ocean of your mind becomes still and pure. And then it becomes like a mirror and reflects the moon. And you can now see the truth and think, I've become enlightened. And you think that you've gained something that you didn't have before, but it's something that was always there. You just weren't able to perceive it. So in that essence, we consider ourselves all perfect. We're just imperfect in our ability to perceive our perfections. And that through human effort that we are able to achieve this and get to a state where we're fundamentally see the fundamental perfection of who we are, and realize that we don't have to gain anything. We just really have to be more self-aware.
James, you said a lot there. It's really, really interesting. I find a lot of these spiritual journeys do really come back to meditation. So how did you learn to meditate?
I learned to meditate through going to a temple that I saw advertised in university. And so when I was 20, I saw this ad on at the University of Toronto, and I went to a Korean temple that was based in Toronto. And I sat there, and being an intellectual, thinking arrogantly that because I was smart, that somehow I could control my mind and meditation would be simple. And when really it's the antithesis of the structure of intellect. Not that intellect doesn't have value, but it is a different set of tools in your mind to be able to meditate. And the more I thought about not thinking, the more I thought. And the more thoughts it created. And so I spent a couple of hours in that temple in an introductory class. And I was so taken away by the fact that I could not control my mind, as somebody who thought that I had great control of my mind. And so I bought 30 books on Buddhism, and I read them in a month just to understand the principles of what Buddhism is, and saw that it was what I had learned to believe on my own since I was 12, and had become atheist till 20, and gone 2,000 steps beyond what I had come up with. And it felt like it would go somewhere in a logical way that I would have come up with if I had a couple of hundred spare years to figure it all out. And through that, I chose to leave university at the time and go live in the monastery for 3 months, where I learned and practiced my meditation for an extended period of time. And what the methodology I learned at the time was counting breaths. And as I said earlier, the more you think about not thinking, the more you actually are creating more thoughts. And what we were taught was, again, to focus on the breathing in and out, to sit in a comfortable position, in an ideal world, full lotus, which is like double leg, cross-legged on top of each other, which is hard for a lot of people. So some people do half lotus or quarter lotus. Sit on a chair, sit on a stool. You can do walking meditation, lie on a bed, lie on the floor. Anything where you're comfortable is the most important. It's more important that you're doing meditation than you're doing perfect meditation, quote unquote. And then really what happened in meditation is that saying that rather than saying stop thinking, stop thinking, stop thinking, you really have to focus on acknowledging thoughts and not interacting with them. So you say, I'm thinking about yesterday's fight. And you just acknowledge that you're thinking about that fight, but you don't engage the thought and start actually reliving the moment. And that's where you start expanding your thoughts. And also saying, don't think about the fight, don't think about the fight. That is a thought in itself. So suppressing thoughts becomes counterintuitive as well. So it's, again, just, I'm thinking about the fight, and you just see the thought wander off into the ether. Then another thought arises, and I'm thinking about my mom, and that I just acknowledge it and let it wander off to the ether. And over time, it's easy to say, but over time, it takes a lot of practice. less and less thoughts will start rising up in your mind, and then your mind becomes more still, and you hold it for a few minutes, and over time minutes become half an hour, whatever, and in those moments you're able to just be in a state of equanimity and peace, and things that are problems in your life, these constructs tend to melt away.
Meditation is something I have been doing regularly since social distancing, since COVID-19 became such a important part of our lives. And I talk to a lot of people, and I know some of my friends are handling it better than others. And whenever they tell me they're just having a hard time dealing with it, and I think we all have good days and bad days right now, I always send them some of my guided meditations, some of my go-to ones that I turn on every night when I'm falling asleep, because it keeps me calm. And that's, I guess, the best thing I can say about my experience with meditation. It makes me relax, it makes me calm, it makes me peaceful, and then I sleep better. I sleep deeper, longer. I wake up in a better mood. I can't tell people how important it is to my life that I do this regularly, especially in stressful times. And I guess prior to this, the most stress you would have would be like problems at work or problems in your personal relationship. But now I feel like there's almost this pervasive stress that everyone is feeling with respect to their health, with respect to the economy, and there's so much stress right now. And I just think meditation is more important than ever. But there's also some additional things that come, I think, with Buddhism that are so important right now. And I did a little bit of research leading into this conversation, and one thing that really spoke to me about Buddhism was the concept that nothing is permanent. So I'm wondering if you can just kind of expand a little bit on that from a Buddhist perspective.
Yes, that even in Buddhism, the sense of I, that I am, is really a false construct, that we are a bazillion molecules and atoms that are changing every single moment. So the I that I am right now is microscopically different from the I am right this now. And so we are always changing. It's convenient to use words that are constructs to describe us as an I. And this I is conditioned by the I was a moment ago. Just like you look at old childhood photos, you are not that person, but yet you are related to that person somehow. And you're on a cycle, on a path where you are that young James at 7, be conditioned to James at 8, conditioned to James at 9, to the me now at 52. And that really, that we are interconnected with our past selves, but we are not our past selves. So there's no sense of I. In that sense, Buddhism also doesn't really believe in the sense of a permanent soul, because we're always in a state of change, and there's no permanent soul in that sense, that we are just an ever-going flux. And a lot of the pain we have in life is out of constructs of attachments. So we are attached to, I have to have this, or even a human being. I love this person. If this person leaves your life, that attachment is now ripped away, and you have this loss, and so then you feel pain. But you realize that everything is impermanent, whether that's happiness or sorrow or anger or anything. And so there's no need to form attachments, that, I've even talked about in my own personal relationships, that I don't want to be married in the sense of through obligation, that we are walking a path side by side by choice. And whether we walk that path for 10 days, 10 years, or 10 lifetimes, it's through choice and not through obligation. We're not shackled, and that we're still individual, we are separate, we are, and that really, everything that you're suffering is really a construct in your mind, that, every day the sun will still rise, tomorrow the universe doesn't care about your problems, and I mean that in a kind way, that realizing that you can lie. I realized I lied in my bed in anxiety or depression over periods of time in my life, and realized that, once I snapped out of it, everything went on in life outside the window of my bedroom window. Whether the universe didn't know whether I was happy or sad, it didn't care whether I was happy or sad. So in that sense, it becomes a choice rather than because the construct of happy or depressed or whatever, in many ways, and it's very easy to say intellectually, and it's harder to realize. I get that as someone who has gone through anxiety and depression before in my life. That we live in a society with a lot of sensitive souls, and sometimes the people that you think that are the worst in society are really just the most sensitive, and they don't know how to handle and cope with a non-nurturing society. So we do an injustice to ourselves, that we don't nurture ourselves, we don't nurture our families and our friends and coworkers in the way that we want to, because we're all living the rat race and so focused on survival and not thriving.
Attachment. That's really significant, I think, because I think what you said there about we're so attached to results, right? Like whether that's the promotion or the better house or the better car or the perfect relationship, and it's the who you are when everything is stripped away, right? When there's nothing other than you, are you okay? And I think that's why some people are having a hard time with social distancing, because we fill our lives with so many things. We're always running from one thing to the next, or chasing some goal or some person or some ideal, that when you're forced to kind of just sit quietly for a while, I think a lot of people don't quite know what to do with themselves, and because they're listening to their mind now, and people's minds are not always happy places to live, right?
Yeah, so one of the things I realized in myself in my own personal journey is that how self-aware I recently became of how we distract ourselves from ourselves because we are so scared to be alone. And this is pre-COVID, that the moment that there's some quietness, we tend to, and we're alone with ourselves, we tend to have the subconscious freak out where we grab, whether it's the TV, whether some people it's drinking or gambling or drugs, or whether
Social media.
social media, whether it's food, there are so many things, friends, whatever, that I, not that any of these things are bad unto themselves, but when they become crutches or avoidance techniques, then they become problematic, and that we freak out when we are truly alone, and that's where, when you have that freak out moment, that's the crux of where you have the opportunity to do the most work and growth in yourself, and that's where meditation comes in. And as I said, don't be worried about the perfect technique. Don't be worried about doing it for the perfect length of time. Just do it for 1 minute, do it for 5 minutes, and worry about getting to half an hour. That can happen weeks, months later. It's just about doing something and starting a practice that grounds you, and to realize that everything that you're scared of is opportunity for change and growth and true happiness. That we structure our happiness in the sense of what's familiar and not what is truly what we call familiar, we feel safe in because we are familiar with it, but it's not really a healthy safe. And if we can learn to be in touch with ourselves and get validation from ourselves and be happy alone with ourselves, then we are strong everywhere in every situation in our lives, and things we become Teflon, and people's troubles and problems at work or in personal lives just slide off of us because we are our own validator. We are our own source of happiness. And we can also have compassion for those around us, that they are feeling pain and suffering, and not to personalize their behavior and to see their behavior as a reflection of their own challenges, of their own relationship with themselves.
And it's really interesting because, like you, I have read a lot of books on New Age, on tarot, on enlightenment. I have a very extensive library, and I find that meditation is something that forces you to practice what you've read. It's one thing to have the knowledge, but I think it's the application of the knowledge that's key. So that when I find myself getting super irritated with something, that's the moment where you have to interrupt those thoughts, those patterns, and go, okay, what's coming up now? What is this telling me? Why am I reacting? Why am I so aggravated by this text message or this picture on social media? Like, what am I learning from this, as opposed to just getting caught up in the aggravation. And then, you call your friend and you tell your friend why you're so irritated today, or you're complaining or whatever. So I try to, and I'm not necessarily an expert on this by no means, but I try to stop in the moment, right? Because there's no point in me reading a book this weekend about spiritual practice if I'm not willing to at least make an attempt when that irritant comes up to try to stop it in its tracks and try to figure out what that moment's trying to teach me.
Yeah, no, I think that's perfect. Yeah, because what happens is that, as you said, that is just sort of, as you meditate more and more, you become more self-aware, and then you become an observer to yourself. You start catching your own behaviors and going, that bugs me. Why does that bug me? What is that bringing up in me? Because that's, as you said, that's an opportunity to learn. In my spiritual retreat, I shared it with a woman who was my sort of antithesis, that pushed every button that I had. And I really regretted the fact that she was there with me, until I realized that she was a teaching moment for myself, to realize these are really red flagging the areas I need to work on, because I really should not be bothered by the things that she is doing if I truly am grounded with myself. And so I learned to thank her by the end of at the end of the retreat. The thing that I often do is that, as well, is that helps some people, is that when you're thinking in your head, you are in fear-based thought, and things that make sense in your head don't make sense out loud. And so sometimes if you stop and articulate it, whether you just sort of whisper it under your breath if you're in company, or you say it out loud if you're alone, and say actions that you're thinking, and you hear it with your rational brain and going, that's crazy talk. And that makes no sense. And you realize, why on earth am I listening to this? But that's what you realize, is that when you're in your head a lot, that it's often anxiety and fear-based thoughts that are driving you, and you don't realize it because it makes sense inside, and you really have to bring it out to question it and challenge it. And it's not about necessarily killing it, but it's about always challenging and doing a counter argument to what it's trying to tell you to do. You'll never get. I tell people I'm not fearless, I'm just not fear inhibited. And so I say hello to my my daughter joining us here. Hello, madam. And
so you're not fearless, you're fear inhibited.
Not fear inhibited. So I still feel like freaking out when I do something that other people necessarily wouldn't do. So my fear hasn't gone to zero. I've let it scream, I let it speak its voice, I acknowledge it, and then I ignore it and do what I want to do. So whether that's jumping from a plane, or or that type of activity, bungee jumping or things like that I've tried to force myself to do, is where I try. It's sort of like meditation, where you don't want to stop the thoughts, because stopping the thoughts just brings them more. Repressing fear or repressing anxiety is not going to make it go away. Acknowledging it is what depowers it.
It's like when they say you have to sort of make friends with your fear or with your anxiety, because I think, you've said a lot there that I feel like is very accurate, is that it's present, and ignoring it or trying to push it down doesn't work. It's all about acknowledging it and just letting it be with you, but not letting it take over.
Right. And part of that comes into judgment, because we tend to not only judge others and judge things, we also judge ourselves. And judgment is laced with a lot of like the word should is a very loaded word with shame, that I should be doing X, Y, Z. And we need to learn to be kind to ourselves and stop judging ourselves and judging others. And once we release ourselves from the thoughts of judgment, that we find that we are at much more peace with ourselves, because when you're not doing something you think you quote unquote should be doing, you're doing something else subconsciously, that maybe, that life is a marathon and not a sprint. And going to the gym every single day, if that's what you think you should be doing, I've never been that type of person, but if that's what you think you should be doing and you're not doing it, then you start feeling guilty. and beat yourself up. But that in a marathon, sometimes you need to run at a slower pace. Sometimes you need a break, you need a water break, or you need a food break to recharge yourself. And that will allow you to win the long-term marathon. And so you have to see it as part of a strategy of surviving and thriving, and not just guilting yourself because when you turn things into obligation, then you build an internal invisible wall to these things. And it needs to be done out of, is this healthy for me? Do I have capacity? And it's okay to not have capacity, because we all have that sort of sine wave up and down in terms of our capacity and our ability. And sometimes on one day we're blasting on 10, and another day that we're just recharging our batteries. And you need to give yourself space to recharge your batteries and be kind to yourself, and not be the taskmaster about these things. Just you'll get there, and just be patient and kind.
Exactly. Be kind to yourself. I think so many of us, in our heads, we have these tapes just playing. They just play over and over again. And we're blasting ourselves for things we're not doing that we should be doing, or that we're just not good enough. And that to me is such an important principle of Buddhism. It's this compassion, this kindness, but not just for others, and maybe even most importantly, for yourself. And
If you can't
I've
give it to yourself, you can't give it to others.
True enough, true enough. And I have read some Wiccan teachings, and one of their laws is called the threefold law. And it says basically that whatever you put out comes back to you times 3. So that sort of keeps me in line when I really feel like just sending out a whole lot of negative energy towards somebody I feel has wronged me, or situation, or whatever. But I just want to kind of bring it back to Buddhism and mention the concept of karma. And I'm wondering if you could just talk a little bit about karma with respect to Buddhism.
Well, technically, one interesting fact that most Westerners have mixed up, that technically, if you read correctly, karma actually literally translates as action. And what people in the West think of karma is really written in the original scriptures as the fruit of karma. So karma is the deed, and the fruit of karma is what we consider the sort of boomerang effect of what we do. And it's not, and karma is not a judgment. It's not a, it's like, it's good or evil. It's more about healthy or unhealthy. Is this leading me and others to something positive? If you do something that's with good intentions and good effect, then good things will happen to you, and vice versa. I guess Wiccan amplifies it by a factor of 3.
Keeps me in line, James.
But yeah, so it's basically that and sometimes karma isn't instant. Sometimes you're thinking bad thoughts, and because you're in your head, you end up stubbing your toe and screaming bloody murder. And sometimes you do something bad, and you know that you've done something that has been unhealthy or unkind to yourself or to others, and by injuring yourself or others, you end up re-injuring yourself as well. And that's basically what it is. And it's not about, again, moral judgment. It's about, is this, like even Buddha talked about, I might know 10 million things, but I'm only telling you the 10 things you need to know to achieve enlightenment, because everything else is just distraction from enlightenment. It's not that it's good or bad. It's not judgment. It's just that does it lead to enlightenment? Yes or no? And that he just stayed focused on the goal. So karma is just really about being good to yourself and being good to others, and knowing that will come back in spades. If not everything is instant karma, good or bad, and not everything is. So if you just put it out there that good things will happen to you, you will attract the energy that you were putting out.
I like it. And I think that's a really nice place to conclude this. And I think if people are going to take anything from this, I think maybe be kinder to yourself, and maybe start a meditation practice, huh?
And it doesn't whether you do Buddhist meditation, you do transcendental meditation, or any type of meditation from any other type of group. It's just important that you meditate small, imperfect, be kind, and you'll get there. I have faith in all of you.
James, thank you so much for doing this today. It was awesome. I really appreciate you.
Thank you for having me.